like to ask David Clark and Dina Parish to introduce the concept of agonism and to share your thoughts about this with us.
Thank you very much. I'll be leading on this session. David and I discussed how to do things, and I think it's easiest if I start us off here. I've got a PowerPoint which I will try and share in an instant. But what I'm going to try and do over the next 20 minutes or so is to provide a recap of what is agonistic memory, and then draw out the salient points from the 2 chapters that we asked you to look at beforehand, which reflects on the lessons learned about agonistic memory from the Unrest projects. And I hope to draw out some, well, hopefully relevant questions for the DisTerrMem project from those readings. I think on the PowerPoint I'm clear. David has confirmed he's looked at the PowerPoint, it is clear. I'm worried that I'm not going to make sense because I'm recovering from COVID. So if I'm a bit woolly, apologies. I'm very happy to share the PowerPoint with you all afterwards. So let me just share my screen. There we go.
Yeah, for a while there. So
okay, can everyone, is that okay? Can everyone see that all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So I'm going to start off with agonistic memory, how it started, I suppose, and that's in the 2016 article published by Anna Bull and Hans Lauger Hansen in Memory Studies. And I'm assuming that most of you will be very aware of this this article and the tenets that it puts out, which we tested on the Unrest project. So, as a disclaimer too, this is very much according to these 2 authors. Okay, it's their understanding of agonistic memory. All right. So, according to them, it's possible to distinguish between 3 and only 3, and they really emphasize that, particularly Anna Bull, generic ethico-political modes of remembering. So these are antagonistic memory, cosmopolitan memory, and agonistic memory. So antagonistic memory represents the past in terms of a moral struggle between essentialized collective identities conceiving the other as an enemy to be destroyed. So it's basically setting up a really quite simplistic binary between us and them, okay? Cosmopolitan memory represents the past as a moral struggle between abstract systems, so for example, democracy and dictatorship, reaching out to the other as fellow sufferers of evil. So this is the idea where there's a discourse of victimhood where we're all linked in an idea of universal suffering. Agonistic memory, probably in relation to cosmopolitan memory, but in opposition to antagonistic memory, represents the past as a socio-political struggle where the hegemony in which the other should be viewed as an adversary rather than an enemy, and potentially even as an ally. And we'll see from some of the points that I've drawn out of the 2 articles that that's one of the really challenging elements of it, of this theory, understanding when is an enemy, when is an enemy an adversary, can an enemy become an ally? So these 3 modes of remembering are laid out by Chento Bull and Hansen in a table which has all sorts of problems, which we'll come back to in their initial article. And they revisit this table in chapter 2 of the book, which has come out of the Unrest project with some more categories. But this table, I won't spend too much time going through it, because I think we know these differences between these memory modes, but this just lays out very clearly, and I think probably in quite a reductive way, the main characteristics of the antagonistic mode, the cosmopolitan mode, and the agonistic mode. Okay? So what agonistic memory does is to contextualize the events of the past in order to better understand the social and political conditions that led to violent conflict and mass perpetration. Okay, so this idea of deep contextualization and a really profound understanding of the events that led to any traumatic event is really, really important in setting up this idea of agonistic memory. It could be argued that this is just doing good history, yeah? It repoliticizes the past and the relationship of the past to the present. And it does this through this deep contextualization work, but it also does this through drawing on emotional work, okay? So this is emotional work in terms of how we're relating to the past, but also in terms of the agonistic potential of coming to terms with that past. And we'll discuss the difficulties of talking about, defining, reflecting on those emotions as part of the questions in relation to the Unrest Project and DisTerrMem. It's one of the big questions, I think, that we didn't answer on the Unrest Project. It relies on radical as opposed to consensual multi-perspectivity. Now, this is the idea that many different perspectives are represented, not just an us and them, a good and bad, but bringing in all sorts of different perspectives which do not agree, and that's really important here. It's one of the big criticisms that Bull and Hansen aim at cosmopolitan memory, that it's got caught up in this idea of a consensual multi-perspectivity. So there are different perspectives, but basically everyone is on the same page, everyone agrees. Bull and Hansen argue very strongly that the whole point of, and this is very much based on Muth's idea of agonism, is that these different perspectives have to be in conflict. They can't be in consensus for things to move forward. Okay, but this is where it starts getting really tricky, because we're looking at that radical multi-perspectivity to deconstruct the hegemonic memory regime, and then to open up to alternative democratic imaginings, okay? And yeah, that's where it gets tricky with what are these alternative democratic imaginings, yeah? It's one of the criticisms that could be brought in here. So that I'm already going on too long, but that sums up agonistic memory as it was posited in that initial article. Now, so if we go to the second chapter of the Unrest book, we can see how these authors, so Bull and Hansen, and with the help of a Spanish philosopher, Francisco Colom, start reflecting on the lessons learned from the 3 years of work that we did for Unrest. So just a really brief overview of Unrest for those of you who don't know about it. I think probably everybody does at this point. You're probably sick of hearing about it. But it was testing this theory, this agonistic memory theory, and we did this through a range of different projects. So there were 2 empirical work packages that looked at mass exhumations of graves in Spain, Poland, and Bosnia. And then a second empirical work package, which I was involved in, which looked at war museums in 4 different European countries. So that's France, Germany, Slovenia, and Poland. So there were those 2 empirical work packages. There were, and then there was a series of creative interventions as well. So we commissioned a play. We put together an exhibition about war, which used computer games to explore war as well. And David and I, for our sins, also created a MOOC, a massive open online course, which engaged a huge number of people, thousands of people, with these different modes of remembering. Excuse me. So some of the lessons learned from the work on this project. So number one, and I think this is really important for our project, this is a theory that has been elaborated within a European context, and unrest was very much a European project. So we're looking at certain more settled, unsettled memory cultures, but this is all taking place within a predominantly cosmopolitan framework. Okay, so that's sort of number one. The second point that's been discussed a lot already is the reductionism of ideal types, and you will have seen the shortcomings of that with the presentation that I've just given of those 3 memory modes. Okay, if we start putting these types of memory modes into tables, it becomes really difficult to understand the nuances, the complexities, the value and the challenges of working with them, and that's the sort of work we can draw out here. Okay. There's a really strong dependence on local memory frames and local political contexts. And this is really important, I think, to emphasize for DisTerrMem, but it was also really relevant for unrest as well. Without deep contextual knowledge and understanding, you can't get to grips with what's going on in a certain context. And we came up against this time and time again with unrest, and we are now with DisTerrMem. For example, the case of the mass exhumation of graves in Spain was a really good example of how understanding and interacting, engaging with local contexts is key to really getting a grip of what's going on. And we were really fortunate with unrest to be working with researchers who have a very strong understanding of those local contexts. And we have that within DisTerrMem as well. And it's just thinking about, I think, how to capitalize on that knowledge and how to share it. There's a danger of a return to antagonism. So one of the big questions brought up during the Unrest project was this idea of, so yeah, when does antagonism stop and where does agonism begin? Yeah, it's not linear. I'll come back to that idea, but it's often in certain extreme cases, or what we would regard as extreme within the European context, there was a very real danger of returning to an antagonism by introducing agonistic memory within this context. And we saw this in Bosnia, with the empirical work package on the mass exhumation of graves. One of the things that we did with the play, which is to do with mass exhumations of graves, is that we toured it in Spain. We took a recording of it to Poland, and we were going to do the same in Bosnia. But our ethics advisor advised us very strongly not to do that because the memory context was still too raw. Okay, so it risked triggering antagonisms in a way that obviously we're not aiming to do. Okay, so so that's something to flag up. Okay, so yeah, this is this leads nicely, I think, into the next point. The complexities of agonistic memory means that working with it You've got to be aware of the historical contingency in which you're working with, and in which agonistic memory is working with too. And you've got to include all these different points of view, these discordant perspectives, and that can often be really chaotic. It's never going to be neat. It's often going to be very, very messy, and that's challenging already, and you've got to do that without legitimizing the crimes that have been committed. And that's one of the big dangers of returning to antagonism there. So I guess the main conclusion from chapter 2 would be that agonistic memory is fluid, it's relational, and it's contextually embedded. Okay. One of the findings that I'll come back to in a few minutes is this idea that there's not really what we found on the Unrest project, and this is unsurprising, is that there isn't really any context which is totally agonistic. What we found more often were agonistic moments. That's when agonistic interventions took place, or they emerged from different projects we were looking at. But more often than not, what we found was that several different memory modes coexist and interact at the same time. And the challenge there is identifying these and working out how they're interacting with each other. Okay, so those are the lessons learned. Oh no, I've got another slide on this. So what Chentable, Hansen and Colum usefully do, I think, in chapter 2 is to lay out, well, they start discussing, which is quite surprising, whether a combination of agonism and cosmopolitanism work better. This was, this came up a lot in the project. We discussed this a lot, that the failings, what they see as the failings of cosmopolitan memory are arguable. Yeah, that many would contest that those are failings at all, and that they actually apply to agonistic memory as well. So what they've done in this article is to lay out 2 different scenarios for cases where agonistic memory can be used, and other cases where a combination of cosmopolitan and agonistic memory could be used. Now, why I'm not going to read out the quotation, that's really boring, but I can, again, I said I can share the PowerPoint, which might be useful. But I think one of the challenges of this is defining what is a more settled case, and it's a challenge that we met during unrest. We thought, for example, that the war museums that we were looking at, particularly the First World War museums, would really present a history that's been dealt with. Yeah, but findings quickly showed, and I think this is probably not a surprise to anyone in this room, that's far from being the case. So what we might consider to be settled, to be colder, as they posited in unrest as one of the hypotheses, is actually far from being the case. Okay, so I'm going to move on to chapter 8 and just work through some of the main points from this chapter and start drawing out the questions that we can apply for DisTerrMem. What my final slide is the questions, is a summary of the questions that I've drawn out from these 2 chapters. Okay, so this is interesting, yeah, because you've got chapter 2 and chapter 8 in this volume, which are basically arguing slightly different things about the theory of agonistic memory. Okay, so these are all researchers within the project. This second chapter is written by Stefan Berger and Wolf Kannsteiner, and you can really see, I think, just through the differences in how they're laying out these arguments, the discussions that went on during unrest, but the discussions that need to continue going. So we're not going to come to a consensus on this. Yeah, this is very agonistic in itself. We're not going to agree, I think, and you can see this with the work of the presented in these two chapters. And also the authors in chapter 8 make very clear that the authors in chapter 2 do not agree with their findings. Okay, so they're not happy to put their names to that. So yeah, interesting in itself, I think. In chapter 8, what they're doing is pointing to some of the values of agonistic memory, but also to some of its shortcomings. It argues, Berger and Kahnsteiner argue that agonistic memory does draw attention to the blind spots and political efficacy of existing memory culture. But it's really keen on this idea that a combination of agonism and cosmopolitanism works better. So what they're putting forward as a solution is an idea of an agonistically inspired playbook of strategies that's based on a cosmopolitanly structured set of values. Okay, so I think they're trying to delineate what would be agonistic values, as we were within the Unrest Project, and seeing all the challenges which comes with that. So I've just drawn out some quotations from that chapter, where they're talking about how agonism and cosmopolitanism can work hand in hand to address some of the challenges in contemporary memory cultures. They talk about a liberal memory playbook, and for me, this smacks of Wolfgang Steiner. It's very much his quite playful, provocative style of writing, the big question for us on DisTerrMem, I think, is where can we use this liberal memory playbook, and is it even possible in the different and comparative contexts of the case studies that we're looking at in DisTerrMem? Okay. What they spend quite a long time in this chapter doing is addressing the limitations of the transnational turn in memory studies. Now, agonistic memory very much belongs to this transnational turn, as do ideas such as Astrid Earle's traveling memory, or Michael Rothberg's multidirectional memory and the implicated subject, for example. Okay, so I think we can talk about these ideas as being transnational. And what I've done is just picked out a few quotations of where they're looking at the limitations of this transnational approach, which seems very what's the right word? Comfortably applicable in what they're calling the Northwestern context, which maybe what I'm calling the European context earlier. Okay, so in our affluent societies, we like these ideas, these transnational ideas, which we're happy to apply to certain memory cultures. Okay. And they're just flagging up that in other areas of the world and other societies, this may well not work. They also question the frames that we're using. So we may well be thinking in transcultural terms, in transnational terms, thinking about creating memory products, thinking about studying memory products. We're working in transnational media spheres, but that does not mean that the context that we're studying works in that way too, or is structured and framed in that way too. And the tensions between those different framings are, well, yeah, I mean, they're potentially quite explosive, definitely difficult. And that's where this deep contextual knowledge is really important. Also, the concepts put forward within transnational memory studies, I'm using that as an umbrella term, we might be quite happy using them in an elite context, yeah. But these will not be, there won't be something that will be embraced by people working in certain contexts where they want to maintain some sort of independence from forces of globalization, for example. Okay, so these are the limitations that they set out in chapter 8. So what about the value of agonism? Yeah, I think we're going to spend hours talking about the limitations. So I just want to emphasize what could be the value of agonism for DisTerrMem, I put with a big question mark. So obviously agonistic memory shares some of the blind spots of these transnational memory theories. But what it does do usefully, and what not all these theories do, is that it emphasizes the importance of the political and a need for a political memory culture. Okay, that's a politics of memory is key to any understanding of agonistic memory. It's also the emotional side of memory politics, which I think it usefully starts exploring, and which we can potentially continue working on with DisTerrMem. So it addresses the emotional side of memory politics by incorporating emotions into the historicization of the past. That is at the heart of agonism. But it also incorporates emotions in its own endeavour to promote solidarity, a socially just and free society through agonistic memory. Okay, there's a researcher at the University of Edinburgh, a political scientist, Mihaela Mihai, who's doing really, which is published work on agonistic emotions already, and has recently published a book, which I think, is really useful for the work that we're doing as well. So my question here would be, can we account for this emotional work in agonistic terms in the different contexts, the different case studies of DisTerrMem? How do we talk about emotions in the context of this project? So some of the challenges of agonism. So I've laid out the values. So this the politics of memory, this emotional political context, but the challenges of agonism, and there are many. So where do you draw the line between legitimate and illegitimate conflicts, and who best fits the role of adversary or enemy? So it's where do you draw the line? Where does someone become an ally and an adversary rather than an enemy? And this is all about respect. It's all about being on a level playing field, but how do we establish that level playing field in a context of conflict as well? I think it's agreed, but you could argue that these are cosmopolitan values, that the agonistic political arena cannot permit anybody who commits acts of physical violence or encourages physical violence against political opponents, okay? So although agonism is based on conflict, it doesn't promote violence in any way, okay? So these are some of the difficulties, drawing that line between enemies and adversaries, then the difficulties of determining the limits of legitimate political speech and legitimate political action in an agonistically constituted public sphere. So it's the big free speech question, yeah, okay. Also, I suppose one of the things that comes out in chapter 8 is so you know, what happens once you've got all these perspectives together? What happens, you know, what does that open up to? And it's a real challenge of to develop a sense of optimism about the strategic potential of agonism. Okay, we can criticize it until the cows come home. Okay, but what about opening up onto some of this agonistic potential? Yeah, what does that mean? Okay, and then a final challenge that comes out of chapter 8 and is something that we grappled with a lot on the Unrest project, is this idea of radical multi-perspectivity. Okay, so if we're talking about radical multi-perspectivity and people not agreeing, this leads to this draws heavily on Bakhtin, on dialogical open-endedness. Okay, and what do we do with that open-endedness? It's really difficult to pin down, obviously, because it's open-ended, and it's really difficult to discuss. It's one of the strengths of literary texts, for example, which can work exceedingly well can function in a dialogically open-ended way without any problems, okay? But it's much more challenging in some of the contexts that we're working on in the context of unrest, but also in the context of DisTerrMem. So the question that I wanted to draw out here is, what are the ethical values and strategic considerations that guide the work of DisTerrMem? And can they work in relation to agonistic memory? Would those values, would those considerations be what we term as cosmopolitan? Okay, so I've got 2 more slides, I think, and the last one is just summing up the questions. So one of the key findings, I think, for DisTerrMem and of the Unrest project, full stop, is that agonistic memory doesn't exist in isolation. Okay, so we found many landscapes, and I mean, they took us totally by surprise. I think I'm just thinking about the context of the in Spain of the mass exhumations of graves, where we thought it was going to be broadly cosmopolitan. I don't think we and it wasn't at all. There were all sorts of different memory modes in operation here. Okay, so yeah, it's not linear. It's not, you can't put it in neat boxes. So yeah, it's this idea that they appear, as it says in the quotation, side by side, intermingled, and they're often mutually constitutive. And I think that's interesting as well. So it's not agonistic memory working in isolation. Okay, but I've said this quite a few times during this presentation, and I will say it again because I think it's probably one of the things that really struck me from being on secondment in Armenia, is this idea that we really need to be able to distinguish those different memory modes to identify what is going on. We need really deep contextual understanding and knowledge of the local contexts to understand this, okay? And so the big question, I think, for that is how can we acquire this during the course of the project? Anna, who I think is going to respond to this presentation, who has some thoughts on agonistic memory to share, when we were in Armenia, talked about us being parachutist researchers, and how do we cope with that? Yeah, we parachute into an environment. We've got to work quickly to understand the complexities of what's going on, and the sensitivities, the challenges, the nuances. So I haven't addressed any of these questions. I've opened up these questions, which come from unrest, which I think are applicable to DisTerrMem, and I've just summarised them on this final slides. So, are any of our case studies settled enough to use agonistic memory? Can we use the liberal memory playbook in the different and comparative contexts of DisTerrMem? Can we account for politico-emotional work in agonistic terms in the different contexts of DisTerrMem? I think there'd be some really fascinating work to do there. What are the ethical values and strategic considerations that are guiding our work? Can they work in relation to agonistic memory? It might be that they can't. And this is for me the big one, and it's a big challenge, I think, how can we acquire the deep contextual understanding and knowledge of local contexts to understand how memory modes work together in the course of the project, but also in the course of a secondment, in the course of 30 nights somewhere? Okay, so that's it from me. And as I said, I hope I made sense, and I'm very happy to share these slides.
And David, do you want to? David, do you want to add something to the Nina presentation, maybe?
I do not. Much more interested in hearing what everybody else has to say, because I think Nina has summarised that very admirably in all of the detail that she brought to that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. That was really introduction to the concept we are working on within this project. So I would like to ask for some comments. Maybe can you start?
Maybe from the,
Yeah.
how about we just go back to the table?
Yeah. More yes.
So each of us is going to speak only 7 minutes. Okay. Where I'm going to speak to. You can talk to the camera. Thank you, Nina, for this very interesting presentation. I just want to share some ideas, and my ideas are based on the reading of 2 articles by Anna Sentogul, and especially the one, Agonistic Memory and Post-Conflict Societies. And the second one, which I have the PDF version written by her and by her colleague, they are nearly the same. Of course, the articles cannot be the same, but the ideas elaborated in both of them are nearly the same. So, why you decided first to listen to me? Because I am. My approach is a little bit critically to this theory in general, and the main base for the criticism is, if to say in 2 words, there are no cases. There are no cases which this agonistic memory is trying to resolve. The both articles which I read aren't based on any case. They are not discussing any case. It's very important for me as historian and as a social cultural anthropologist, because I prefer to work if the theory is working also in the reality, in the field. That's good theory. If it is not, that theory will not have a future. Let me just share with you, so sorry for talking maybe a little bit long, why this theory arises. It's my opinion as an historian, because Second World War ended, the Cold War ended, then came the time of peace. European Union was created, and European Union is trying to create some theories in order to go on for at least several dozen years with peace. So in that case, you first of all you need to create theories which are aimed on peace. And one of the theories is just to take out the A and T from antagonistic and leave agonistic, and to create something regarding, excuse me for being very schematic, but this is my approach. So why this theory began to create. came into the life. I am just much better. I am just citing. Sento-Bull and Hansen distinguished between three generic ethico-political modes of remembering. Antagonistic memory represents the past in terms of a moral struggle between essentialized collective identities, considering the other as an enemy to be destroyed. In our case, I mean Armenians and Turks, with whom we have problems for more than 100 years, we are not saying that they are our enemies. We are not saying let us destroy the Turks and the Turkey. Absolutely. The Armenian approach is absolutely not based on the destroyment of any other people or any other country. We are just asking them to return what they have taken from us, to come to the justice. The same as the Jewish people were saying, they were not saying that let us destroy the Germans who killed 6 million Jewish people. They are saying, no, we need justice. And in case of Jewish people, it works. In our case, it isn't working. So let us not use the terms conceiving the other as an enemy to be destroyed. No, it has no connection with reality, at least in the cases of Armenia, Turkey, or Jewish people and Germany after the World War II. As a socio-political struggle for hegemony in which the other should be viewed as an adversary, and after that is coming ethnic mobilizations and actions. So let me come to today's Armenia. For example, our Prime Minister is suggesting, in my opinion, agonistic approach, century of peace. And the answer is, the answer which we are receiving from Azerbaijan, there is no such an entity like Nagorno-Karabakh, and Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. That is very clear answer. We know that what happened to the Armenian populated regions of Azerbaijan, which were becoming part of Azerbaijan, ethnic cleansing. The same happened in Nakhichevan during the Soviet era, and the same will happen with Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians if it will become part of Azerbaijan. That is to say, it is not just being as an adversary, and so the agonistic approach in case of. In our case, in case of Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh, will bring to the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh. And when we are comparing Jews and Armenians, these are different cases in quite a lot of issues. The Jews haven't lost their motherland, and Germans, Germans asked for excuse. Turks deported Armenians from their homeland, and they are still denying the fact of genocide. I want to stress on the denial, and that denial is the reality for nowadays Armenian-Turkish relations. And you can go and talk, make presentations about the agonistic memory to the Turks. Maybe it can work, but in our case, if there is still denial, and you can't say that in case of denial, let us discuss the issue, let us move forward, let us bring the different memories together, let us put them near each other and see what will happen. Nothing will happen. It is denial, and I'm talking not just as an Armenian, but denial is denial. In case of Jewish, it is also denial. In our case, it is also denial. That is to say, it is not not scientific approach. It is based on lie. So if you have a deal with lie, how to bring that memories together and put them near each other and say, okay, guys, let us live in the peace. It will not work. And if the alternative, there are very good terms used in this article, such as alternative visions of the past. And if these alternative visions of the past are based on denial, are based on lie, we shall tell about that to other researchers, and we need to criticize them, not just say that, okay, nothing will happen, let us move forward. In reality, it has absolutely no basement. Can the denial of Holocaust be qualified as an alternative vision of the past? I want to receive answer from my British, Polish, and Pakistani colleagues, as researchers, as historians. My answer is no. It cannot be qualified as alternative vision of the past. Very, very nice term, very nice expression, but it doesn't have any connection with the reality. Next idea regarding the understanding. Agonistic memory promotes radical multi-perspectivity, giving voice to the other and to the subaltern narratives. I'm quoting, it also incorporates the perspectives of the perpetrators, not in order to legitimize them, but in order to understand the historical and socio-political conditions, as well as the passions that led to perpetratorship. Okay, the understanding, with the understanding leads towards what? I want to have an answer. We understand what Turks wanted to do, what were the reasons to organize genocide. We understand what were the reasons of Germans to organize the Holocaust. So what it is bringing to, what is the result of that understanding? I do not have the answer to this question. For this reason, many scholars of transitional justice advocate a process of remembering focused on recasting social memory as a peace strategy, especially by relying on storytelling and on sites of remembrance that bring together victims across the divide. Okay, you can share stories in South African Republic, you can share stories in Rwanda, but we can't share stories with Turks. If you are sharing the stories with them, they are saying, okay, you, the Armenians 100 years ago were allies of Russians, you helped Russians, that's why we organized the genocide. That is the answer. So, and what to do if, and especially by relying on sites of remembrance. What to do if the sites of remembrance are destroyed or churches became mosques? Maybe sit near the door of the mosque and to talk to the person whose father did that or destroyed it, or to give him money and ask to stop the process of destroying, as some Armenian diaspora members are doing. For example, and already in vain. For example, there is a Varagavang church nearby Van, which kilise now named by Turks, and it is maybe 7th century, if not earlier. But it is in the process of ruining, and nearby is the construction of the mosque. Quite a lot of times, diaspora Armenians were giving money to the Turks who are living there in order to stop the destroyment of the church. It doesn't work. So tell them stories to share with them stories of my grandfather, and he will share the stories of his grandfather, how they were killing my grandfather and his relatives. So these are very good, very nice expressions, and it's good when you are reading them, but they have no base in the reality. Shall we say that it happened many years ago? Let us forget, put aside it. What actions must took place afterwards? Armenians just erase the memory which you have for 100 years, and okay, let us live in much better conditions. I do not know. What must took place later, after this storytelling, after sharing the memories, etc., etc. I do not have answer, and I did not see the answer in the article. There is a citation from Mr. Brown, argued that contrasting memories of the past should not be merged into a shared narrative, but acknowledged and worked through. So, if one is denying the other, how they are going to work together? I do not know, and I haven't seen the answer in the article. Okay, very nice idea. It should aim not at reconciliation consensus, but at accepting that conflicts are constitutive of democracy. And what will be the next step? How to move forward? How to resolve the hard situations? This theory isn't suggesting any answer. All my ideas are based on this type. If you want, I can stop there, or I can just try several more examples.
So maybe we can hear some comments from Tomasz and Anna, and we will be back to it because we have some detailed comments, yeah, as I understand too.
Yes, we have some.
Yes, please.
We have some comments, and then we will open the general discussion in which you can share your other
So
ideas.
that's why I asked Malgorzata if how many minutes I can talk.
Yeah, exactly, because we have a time, we have to stop at 12, so
yes,
maybe we can be back to this, because yes, it is important to listen to all your, because it is in fact our founding article and concept, so it would be very important. So maybe now, Tomasz.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nina, for your inspiring and very useful presentation. And thank you, Harrison, for your critical comments. I will be brief. I would like to make two brief points based on how I read Chantal Mouffe's theory of agonism or agonistic democracy. I think my first point refers more to what Nina said about values of agonism, and my second point adds up to some questions or doubts about this position, theoretical position. So let's start with the advantage, because I think it has been said by Nina, but I would like to expose it a little more. So the important advantage of this theory is that it recognizes the crucial role of conflict, right, as the irremovable foundation of political processes. For what does it mean for us? For us, this means that conflict is the very much foundation on which competitive memories grow, and we can't abolish this. And the authors of the chapter 2 wrote something like that. I mean, they rightly note that nationalist and xenophobic movements in Europe and beyond have long recognized and learned about the importance of conflict. right now is that they have used this recognition to build and increase their advantage over liberal left political actors. Because I must say that what might not have been said up to now, but the Chantal Mouffe's theory is openly political. I mean, this is a theory that wants to support the liberal left political actors against the right-wing nationalist and xenophobic movements. So, the advantage between the nationalists, populists who recognized the conflict as a foundation of political processes, and so their advantage over liberal left political actors consists in this recognition, because most of the liberal left political actors still understand political processes, first of all, as policies. So the actions calculated to achieve consensus, a state in which the aspirations of all sides could be equally satisfied. And the theory of agonism would like to provide the liberal left actors with the tools to equalize power relations vis-a-vis the right. And therefore, Chantal Mouffe rightly proposes that we shift to look at political processes more in terms of politics instead of policies, right? So disputes and struggles between different sides whose point of arrival can at most be some kind of a compromise. So not consensus, but compromise. So what this optics says is actually something like that. Let's abandon the illusion that it is possible to make politics in which there is no division into winners and losers, right? In which politics is not a realm in which everyone wins. Let's accept the fact that in politics, it's usually impossible to satisfy all sides of an argument. And this position says there is only politics in which power asymmetries and conflicts of interests and values are inherent. So the best we can do is to manage them in such a way as to steer the political process towards some form of compromise, while at the same time minimizing the destructive potential of power asymmetries between actors. We can't deny that they're existent, like that they exist, right? We can minimize their negative influence. So in short, if we follow agonistic theory in this recognition, in acknowledging that conflict is the fundamental engine of political processes, we could provide a significant portion of realism to our research, right? So, and it is important for two reasons, I think. One, because it would allow us to better grasp the specificity of the antagonistic politics that is nowadays spreading rapidly, even since 2019. I mean, now 3 years have gone and we have completely different situation in the region. Like the antagonistic politics increased rapidly throughout only 3 years. So with this recognition, we can better grasp the specificity of these processes. And in the next step, of course, this position allows us to look for more appropriate ways of counteracting this process. So this is my first point. And the second point is the question, because the question I would like to ask about agonistic theory is related to the very strong emphasis that this position places on the discursive dimension of social reality. Because agonistic theory does a very good job in recognizing the asymmetries of power and power relations in discourse, right? And my question is, therefore, my question to all of us, I guess, is to what extent does it account for the importance of power asymmetries outside discourse at the level of material structures, social, political, economic structures, which are, of course, responsible for the production of discourses, right? So, to what extent agonistic theory finds these structures important, and to what extent it considers, on the other hand, discourse to be maybe something essentially self-contained, like constituting itself over an independent Just about this relation between the material dimension and the discursive dimension in this theory, because I believe that, I pose this question to consider what role this structures, material structures, play for us as researchers of competitive memories at disputed territories. Like, do we pay more attention to discourses, narratives, stories produced by people, by political actors, by institutions, by social movements, or do we pay more attention to their practices, actions, agendas, structures of funding, right? Mechanism of promoting particular types of memory in public space, and so on. In other words, and this is my final remark, I'm asking what could be more fruitful if we consider the material structures which underpin the discourses only as a background for our research, or maybe considering maybe it's better to consider them an independent object of our study, one of among the other objects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'm moving to Anna comments.
Yeah, I would like to bring into discussion the theory of the liberation, as quite often it's put well in comparison with the theory of agonism. And the theory of the liberation attracts me for one particular reason, as it tries to be applicable in political and social life. And it's a big advantage of this theory. And although I'm, let's say, supporter of this approach, I'm also critical of its applicability in certain contexts. And I understand Harutian's points, and I suppose that he can be, but I would like to hear it as critical or about the liberation as he is about agonism. But let me say why I think the liberation is more applicable to social and political life. It refers to similar values that agonistic theory refers to, but maybe it prioritizes them differently. So I think that one among the major values is respect to the other side. That is can be operationalized through certain position of adversaries. Say they are expected to listen to each other rather than speaking in parallel. So rather than monologuing, so their positions in the public sphere is different. So they are not speaking in different public spheres, they speaking to each other within one public sphere. And of course, it's very difficult to achieve. Another one is, another value would be inclusiveness, and inclusiveness means also pluralism. And deliberation is often, the theory of deliberation is often criticized by agonism, that deliberation, for the sake of the agreement or even consensus, what is not necessarily true, tries to silence the minority voices, or through its procedures that are very practical and often institutionalized, because this is the major ambition of deliberation, to institutionalize procedures and that help to develop certain processes, also for the sake of peace, right, and the common agreement. It further marginalizes those who are marginalized. So there is some reflection on how not to do it, and towards deliberation is that it expects the participants to be rational rather than emotional in the way of building narratives. And I think that deliberation has changed. The theory of deliberation has changed a lot under the influence and thanks to criticism from other theorists that support alternative views of the reality, like agonists like Chantal Mouffe, first of all. So now they incorporate more alternative ways of building narratives about supporting certain viewpoints and definitions of reality, as long as they are justified. So the justification is well, the venue, the mode, well, this is a necessary element for building the standpoint and presenting somebody's perspective on the issue under discussion. And we can say that deliberation is good, although still difficult to achieve in the peacetime. It doesn't deny conflicts. I think that it's worth to deliberate, so to exchange opinions and discuss for the purpose of finding solutions to different problems, because it's very practice-oriented approach, right? Well, but it denies conflicts, but it has got its limits. And now, especially after the experience of being interviewing people in Armenia, and my first experience in being in the territory, disputed territory, or in speaking with people affected by the war, I acknowledge how difficult it is to apply any theory into and ready-made solutions to the situation of conflict when you listen to those who are victims of the conflict, and those are also victims on the other side, and it's undeniable. Okay, there are some instances. Of course, I apply the theory of deliberation into the situation of democratization of the political system, for example, in Poland, right? So I'm very much focused on practical aspects of how local institutions function. What is declarative and what is how the institutions has been transformed, how the procedures have been transformed, whether it's reflected in the law, how we can apply that in the situation of the real conflict with violence there. I doubt that it's possible. I think it's possible to do it in between, well, after conflict zones, in the after conflict situations, but still, my thinking goes to, as other authors, and focuses on practical applications, like Ron Levy, the lawyer, apply that concepts to the situation of referendum in the after-war situation, peace referendum, where, of course, the procedure of deliberation allows different voices to be heard. The ones that are silenced by the hegemonic voices, strengthened by media, etc., right? So, I would say we can make it practical. I made some notes that come from interviews, but I doubt that we have time to do that. But I can share those notes that come from interviews with people about that participated into EU supported programs. That the first one was peace building through capacity enhancement and civic engagement. And the other one was civic engagement, capacity building, and crisis response. And those programs, there was very much EU thinking along with the lines of deliberative democracy. There's some ideas, but whether they've been well applied, I'm not sure. But do we have any other, what's the other option? So maybe we can accept some solutions and for the future rethink, because we think about peace and we focus on peace rather than memory, right? We focus on peace and we think how we define situation and the elements that shape the definition of the situation. Well, elements because I have no better words, but the memory about the past shapes the definition of the situation in the present, right? And conditions our thinking about the future. So, Haruchin, I don't know. Well, I would be very happy to speak with you and, of course, other colleagues based on the interviews later on and share with you what I learned about what are the opinions on people that I spoke to who try to work in the frames of EU program, building the peace that is no longer possible at the moment and is continued as the project capacity enhancements and civic engagement in the view of the necessity to reply to crisis, humanitarian crisis as well, I suppose, if we can agree on that. So, well, I don't really have the answers. I've got also questions, but I think that agonistic approach is far too that the focus is not practical enough to speak about solutions for the peace building, but has some important insights that we can base on. I hope it is more or less clear.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that we are talking about this for many years now, in fact. Agonism is rather an idea of a tool for understanding of social reality, because it is something different, and this empirical material and discursive aspect of this theory is also very important to be discussed. But also I would add that we don't need to contextualize only memory on memory politics or politics, but also remember that conflict and peace are also culturally constructed, and I also understand in very different ways. And maybe that's also a problem with such a broad idea. Yeah. And theoretical perspective. So maybe we can now hear some comments or questions maybe from people on site and online, and then we will back to discussion with our panelists. So, yeah.
I have a few questions and I think a remark to make. I might be a little behind the contemporary dialogue in this project because this is my first time interacting face-to-face with everybody. So my first question, I share somewhat similar sentiments with my Armenian colleague, but as a political scientist, I'm more interested in what research methodologies can we use to identify agonistic mode of remembrance while working on any project. For instance, if I'm looking at education curriculum, so I would be interested in identifying a research methodology for exploring or for locating agonistic mode of remembrance in that curriculum. It's not just in curriculum, but as if we look at various case studies, if there are any. So what are the research methodologies that can be used for that purpose? That is my first question. I understand. I went through this article. I think it was written by Wolfgang Steiner. It was part of Unrest Project, I think. And in that article, I understand there was this question of research methodologies in that project as well. I might be wrong. because this is just this is what I got by reading it online, right? So he was talking about memories and over exaggeration of psychoanalysis as a research methodology in studying memory. So that's just like an example of what I'm trying to say here. So first is related to research methodologies, and second, when it comes to storytelling, that if that can be used, but again, that's when it comes to storytelling, it's always that most of the time marginalized groups, their point of view, it doesn't reach us. For instance, if we talk about post-colonial writers, Fanon, with introduction from Jean-Paul Sartre, when a colonized was writing a book about being colonized, it got published with an introduction of a colonizer. So that's one way to put it. That's an issue with storytelling. How is it that it's not always the case that marginalized groups' voices get heard. It's always that that they get subdued, right? They get oppressed, and there are always these dominant groups. Even if we talk about agonistic memory, even if we talk about reconciliation, and that's so I'm not aware about of deliberation theory, which sounds really interesting. It's somewhat very similar to Partha Chatterjee's concept of negotiations, but with that negotiation, marginalized groups still hold a little bit power. That's why they're able to negotiate. It's not deliberation, but it's negotiation. For instance, when he looks at the case of India, he talks about voting rights. He talks about these vendors, street vendors, or this locality around railway station. It's written beyond the governed. So he talks about these people who are living, and they have saying that they're very marginalized. They have no such rights, but they are very mobilized because obviously, again, there's this rational actor theory there, that because government knows that they are their voters, so if they mobilize, they stay on that locality, and they tend to negotiate, and that's how they get their rights. It's not like deliberation, but negotiation. So yeah, so first is research methodology. What can we use? Second is the same, that storytelling marginalized is like this, not necessarily that marginalized groups can be heard, right? With storytelling, it's always that there are multiple groups, and again, it's the same issue that marginalized groups, they tend to get oppressed, and their voices are unheard. And with deliberation, that's again, it's very interesting, and I'm not aware of that theory. But with negotiations, I completely understand that how it can work. That okay, marginalized groups, they still have some power. They have some cards, and like that. So yeah, that's it. Okay.
I have a question, and I want to add it with the Rabia's question of research methodology. I did 2 field works related to politics of memory. And as my colleague was giving the presentation, she mentioned about the ethical issues. So I want to ask about the ethical issues, like when we are talking about memories, getting the truthful answer and getting something out of the state context is very difficult. And in most of the cases, when we are researching memories, we are coming across the predominant actors, predominant political, social, and civil actors. We come across to them. We don't get permissions to meet the people who are getting affected, or like the people who actually gone through this process of memory construction, reconstruction, and then destruction. So how to cope up with the ethical issues that emerge when you are conducting fieldwork or doing primary research on these issues of memories?
Yeah.
It has been yes, long time we are discussing this basic theory we have to work with. So I have once also shared my opinions with Anna Gentlewood being as a discussant for another discussion. So not to repeat the statements there. Here I have a chance to talk. To think more about this and listening also Harry Chun's perspective and valuing Nina's very good presentation, insightful, and seeing the value of knowing local context. I was starting to think that maybe the common understanding, what does it mean past, the term of past, and how we refer to the conflicts as past conflicts or conflicts that are already in the past, because the issue that the tragedy happens 100 years ago, it doesn't mean that it is past conflict, because it's still in our lives. And I see this could be a critical and key point for our understanding of the context. What does it mean, past conflict? And also the political situation and the political context of the conflict areas are key component for us. And I assume that the researchers from the places that have current conflicts from the past impacting their lives still have that worries how to affect the political decision makers, because usually in the context where these kind of conflicts, military conflicts are happening, the political situation is not democratic and is not research based. The politicians are not following by researches and suggestions. Usually they are doing what is come out of their heads, let's say. So based on that political agenda and manipulation and whatever. So I have these two perspectives for now, how to have that mind of being useful as researchers, and also to reconsider what does it mean past conflict in the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to be very brief because I'm speaking about this afternoon, where I will have to have half an hour to elaborate my approach to co-creation, which is based on Chantal Mouffe's theory for art. And I really, something that crossed my mind by listening to you, and also to the perspectivization by Thomas. So it crossed my mind that actually somehow the theory of dissensus by Jacques Rancière and the agonistic theory by Chantal Mouffe were not necessarily intended to discuss memory. And it was more, and also I think it's not intended to be a dominant mode, but more a disruptive mode. So what they are seeking to do is not to replace agonism, antagonism or cosmopolitan memory, but open up these little breaches where you can somehow show a different perspective to bring this into debate and cause moments of discovery, or where you just realize that you have never seen history represented from this angle, and that makes something for you. So the context that I look at is a kind of settled memory in principle, which is the memory of slavery in Britain. And I think that what the unheard voices that you mentioned, so people we were in discussions with in Bath said that these are not unheard voices, these are voices that are not listened to. So that brings us another problem, which is political power, which is something that you also mentioned, that politicians don't listen to us, researchers, but also I really think like who is the intended partner in the agonistic discussion. So if we want to open a debate or a moment of dialogue where
we can recognize the other person's viewpoint, not necessarily to accept it. Who is the person this debate should involve? Is that a policymaker with a certain power? Is that another researcher? Is that a museum visitor? Is that another actor in the same memory scape in the same city where you have different actors, stakeholders being part of the discussion? So I really think that we need to consider this. So if we try to import this as a model that would solve all the problems or the shortcomings of previous models, it may not work because maybe it was not intended to do this. Maybe its role is just to create a moment of disruption where we can envision suddenly something else, and that's a question: who is the person who should envision? So I will discuss this more this afternoon, but just like a little contribution.
Yes, and
Yeah, but maybe I just move also my comment just to my presentation, and that would be better for everyone. Yes.
from online.
Do we have a couple of
Yeah.
minutes? Yeah, I just have a brief comment. In fact, I want to align myself with Professor Arut's position, and I'm just thinking on it, and his position of, as he termed it, denial, the position of denial, the situation of denial. And it's just that I really want to know it more. I really want to dwell on it further, that how can it enrich or how can it go away with the antagonistic position. So it's just, it may be a question for you, if you may answer, but even I'm constantly thinking on it. How does it add in it, or it really criticizes, as you term it, it criticizes, or it just adds up into the antagonistic ways of memory, looking at memory from antagonistic mode.
I just wanted to comment.
So can you please answer or comment on with some more examples?
Well, I can say that the denialism is also a theory. If you want, if you are a perpetrator and if you have a victim, so because you do not want to stay as perpetrator, you need to share your ideas why you have done that, as if why, for example, the Germans organized the Holocaust, and why Turks organized the Armenian genocide. In case of Armenians, the denial has a 100 years history. So from very beginning, they were denying that they organized massacres of Armenians. And still they are continuing as a part of their historiography, as a part of their historical science. And what is important in this case, how to say, the general public, the researchers who are doing researches in the Holocaust and genocide studies reject the denialism, and they, in different cases, they took decisions that no, what happened to Armenians was really genocide. But yet, 10, 11 years ago, I wrote an article titled "Can the Memory of Genocide Lead to Reconciliation? A View from Yerevan?" And discussing the issue, the last paragraph was about the action. So what to do in order to fight against, to struggle against the denialism. And my suggestion was the following: if the Armenians, if Armenia and Turkey simultaneously organize discussions on the TV on the, for example, first channel, which is the most viewed one in Armenia as well as in Turkey, with the participation of not journalists, but scholars, researchers, and each time to discuss one issue. Just scholarly discussion of an issue which is, in case of Turks, is part of their denialist approach, and they think that Armenians are lying from their point of view. So what will give this discussion? It will suggest different views to the Turkish society and to the Armenian society, and in that way to fight, to struggle against denialism. So in our opinion, the Turkish society, and in particular, in my opinion, the Turkish society do not have enough information, enough knowledge about the Armenian genocide. And the way which they can receive that information is the TV. And later, theoretically, I think I am an idealist in this approach. They will vote and create another power, another authorities, which then can take steps in the direction of the recognition of Armenian genocide, etc., etc. So denialism is, in our case, is a very well organized, theoretically based approach of the perpetrators. It is a gortic, it is a tool for the perpetrators.
But still, they are the perpetrators.
Yes, they are the descendants of the perpetrators, and still they are denying.
Still they are denying.
Yes.
David has his hand up.
So, David?
Hi everyone, thanks for the interesting discussion. I just want to intervene here, and obviously, you know, I'm very interested to hear everybody's critique of the agonistic approach. I think what Nina's presentation set out is that those of us who've been working with agonism have been doing so in a self-critical way. I mean, that's what Nina's presentation was all about, was setting out how we try to apply this theory and the challenges we face. So I think it is an unfortunate sort of misrepresentation and caricature of this theory to say that it's just a kind of a one-size-fits-all kind of thing that floats in the air and doesn't have any connection to practical case studies. The Unrest Project worked through and developed that theory precisely by examining case studies. You've all received a copy of the book. I encourage you to read that. But I just want to kind of be, just so that we're clear about how we're debating here, I really want to just underline that I would think that it is a misrepresentation of the agonistic approach to say that this is something which opens the door to denialism, which I think implicitly has been the claim that's been in the room. So without wanting to make too long a sort of speech about it, denialism is clearly a problem in the Armenian case on the Turkish side. All of the cultural practitioners, the NGOs that we talked with when we were in Armenia, were really emphasizing the difficulty of their work in Armenia to try and open up kind of histories, particularly of multi-ethnic coexistence, knowing that on the Turkish side and the Azerbaijani side, those kinds of projects are not possible because there are regimes in place there which close down that kind of engagement with the Armenian genocide, but also, you know, with the history of conflict with Azerbaijan. And that is a major challenge to talking in agonistic terms. But I think Christina's point is very relevant here, in that when we are looking at agonistic interventions, we are quite often working in contexts in which there is an acknowledgement on both sides of the historical facts in terms of crimes that have been committed. You know, the Holocaust would be the prime example. So in the European context, nobody except on the very extreme right-wing fringes these days is kind of a Holocaust denier. It's a very, very, very marginal position. But the point that we were making in the Unrest project is that the consensus around the Holocaust has actually not been particularly successful in stopping the rise of other kinds of right-wing xenophobic nationalist sentiment in contemporary Europe. So that's a kind of a paradox, isn't it? You know, why is we've got this dominant kind of memory of the Holocaust, and yet at the same time, it's not really having a political effect. And I suppose for me, what's key about agonism is creating interventions in a fairly settled situation of cosmopolitan memory in order to highlight where those weaknesses exist. I think that was very much Christina's point. But to say that the multi-perspectivity that agonism would introduce in that context would reopen or encourage denialism, I think is very far from the facts. I'm sorry, I don't feel I've been entirely clear in my explanation there. I've been speaking off the cuff and it's a complex issue, but I am concerned that whatever we think of agonism, whether we think it's useful or not, I would find it problematic if we moved in a direction of saying that agonism is basically equivalent to saying that denialism is okay, because I think that is very much not the case.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So obviously I come from a kind of memorialization context, and especially looking at museum spaces and how museums deal with difficult subjects. Now everybody's quite negative here about the agonistic theory. I want to actually say something positive about this. When you mentioned, Hodian, that there are no examples of those approaches, there are. If you look, for example, at the German context, there are a number now of examples, most prominently the new exhibition at the House of the Wannsee Conference, and explicitly looks at how German society worked at that time and how actually Germany managed to get to the point where the Holocaust happened. And that's very much an approach where, first of all, the site encourages reflexivity, so it encourages the visitor to think about it, what happened. But the second time, the memorial site also is reflective on itself. It looks at its own history. So there are examples. There's another example now. The former women's concentration camp Ravensbrück has two exhibitions now. One, a very new one about the female perpetrator, and there are two. And the point of this exhibition is to challenge visitors, because it suddenly talks about female perpetrators. But the second point is also to break a taboo subject, such as the female perpetrator. So there are a number of examples which show actually addressing the perpetrator is very important, and it's been done in certain contexts. And I personally, having been now to Armenia and having seen the exhibitions, especially I've been 3 times to the Mother Armenia Museum, and what really struck me, especially the Mother Armenia Museum, it's a very antagonistic approach. It's about the heroes on the one hand and the villains on the other. Now, when I spoke to the museum staff there, they said to me, I mean, the key visitor groups, one of them is, of course, the Armenians, but the second largest is Russians. And interestingly, one of the other ones are the Germans. Now, the question for me really is, considering the Russian context at the moment, what happens if I go there as a Russian visitor and I see this very antagonistic approach to exhibition design? That has an impact. I don't know how the German visitors react either. And I had one visit with an academic from Yerevan State University, and we had this really interesting discussion, because I have an issue with exhibiting Stalin. I'm honest, as a German, he didn't. And this is what we need to look at.
when we look at, and I think this is what Nina also was trying, or what the Unrest Project is trying to show, is the antagonistic approaches in some of the museums can have a really detrimental impact on kind of narratives. And which is what doesn't happen so much in the European context anymore, but it certainly happens in the Armenian context. On the other hand, I also agree with you when you're saying it's difficult in the Armenian context, but this is also something what Nina highlighted, is because we are coming at it from a European context. And we are coming at it from a largely peace context, which doesn't happen in Armenia. So it's very difficult to use that approach then if you still have a hot conflict. Yeah. So this is, I think, but this is also something Nina highlighted, it's difficult to actually approach this from the peace conflict. But on the other hand, I wanted to highlight, it is important to address the perpetrator, and there are a number of examples where it happens. And it's also very important to look at some of the antagonistic approaches in the museums in Armenia.
So, for 7 months, I have been at U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum as a researcher, and I know the exhibition quite well. Their space is four stories. So every day I was spending one day to explore one story. STOREY. You understand? I hope. So we do not have enough space in case of the Mother Armenia Museum, and the aim of the Mother Armenia Museum isn't showing what happened to Germany during the Hitler regime. It is not the aim of that museum. The aim, we quite well know that Germany attacked the Soviet Union in order to destroy it, and that's enough. And the story which is told in the Mother Armenia Museum is about how Armenians participated in the defense of Soviet Union, and in that way in the defense of Armenia as their motherland. It is the aim of the museum is not to tell the story of the World War II or Great Patriotic War. The aim of the exhibition is to tell the story of how Armenians were fighting against the Germans. So that is why maybe you, in order to receive more information on that case, the visitor should go maybe to the European museums or American museums. As for example, for our case, I mean the Armenian Genocide Museum Institute, of course, if we will have a space or we will talk more about the Ottoman Empire and the history of the Ottoman Empire, why they came to the idea of organizing genocide. Anyway, there are some attempts to show that ways why it happened. But yes, I must say that the visitors who are getting out from the exhibition at the end are the question, quite a lot of them are questioning anyway why it took place. It means that the answer suggested in the exhibition is not enough. I think it is a challenge for the museum, but anyway, the exhibition was created in 2015, and we have problem of space. But from another point of view, let me use another term. I hope you all know the Stockholm syndrome. I am quoting, agonistic memory should aim at rehumanizing the perpetrators, bystanders, etc. It should aim at an understanding of the motivations, patience, and contexts underpinning both perpetratorship and victimhood. So my question is, and the result must be the effect of Stockholm syndrome, the understanding. If you are putting such a questions, there must be also the answers. Okay, we did understand what moved Germany to organize the Holocaust. We understand what makes Ottoman Empire, what moves him to organize the Armenian genocide. But to have an aim at rehumanizing the perpetrators,
I think, yeah.
it should aim at understanding of the motivations. Of course, it's very important. So, and what will happen next? Shall we say that it was good or it was bad? Because as much as I understand, the agonistic memory is suggesting discussions.
We also have Nina who would like to say something.
So maybe you can answer because it was a direct question, and we will move to Nina.
I think that the idea, when they are suggesting, I mean, I don't want to talk on behalf of Nina or David, but when they are talking about humanizing the perpetrator, what they are essentially suggesting is that you should, because there was a long time in Germany where the perpetrator was seen as a beast. You know, there were a select few beasts who created that. That's no longer the case, because Germany, the way the exhibitions are now designed, but also in terms of how it's taught in school, it was the entire society that made that possible. And that's what I think is meant by humanization, because essentially showing, it was, to give you an example, the new perpetrator exhibition at Ravensbrück, it was the ordinary person from the street who applied for a job in a concentration camp and did that job. They made that decision. And that's what they mean, I think, about humanization, showing that anybody at any one point in time can actually turn into a perpetrator. And I think this is the important aspect. So, Nina.
So maybe we can give a voice to Nina and then to Joanna.
I'm not going to keep the conversation about what to do with a perpetrator here. I think Doreen has made some good points there. I think the US Holocaust Museum does a very good case of exploring this question, and through using multiple perspectives and storytelling in a very intelligent way. I mean, their question is, we've got to keep thinking about it, isn't it? I mean, that's the question they want you to leave with. So what I want to do is address some of the other things that haven't been addressed, because I'm aware that time is passing really quickly. I want to come back to what Rosanna was saying about this idea of what is past, because I think that's really important, and I think it's what I was trying to touch on with this idea of what is settled. Yeah, when can we go in and think critically about these pasts? And Haruti, and I take your point with Armenia, I take your point with Turkey, with Azerbaijan. It's not possible to do that work. I get that. Yeah, I'm not calling that into question at all. So yeah, I think that idea of what is past is something that we can work with on DisTerrMem. I also want to talk about research methodologies. It's not at all true that UNREST hasn't looked at practical case studies. There's a lot of work within the UNREST project, also outside of the UNREST project. I can point you in the direction of lots of different examples. There are lots of different examples in the book already, okay? Most of them are in the European context. One case study where it's worked particularly well, which is really interesting, in the Brexit context at the moment, is in the Northern Irish context, where a colleague made an exhibition using oral histories, drawing on these ideas of radical multi-perspectivity in a in a really innovative way and a potentially very controversial way. And he's also been using, doing education workshops with school children, drawing on those oral histories as well. It needs all sorts of conditions for that work to be able to take place successfully. And one of them was having a very bold museum director who was ready to engage with these questions around the Troubles in Northern Ireland in a really critical way. Research methodologies, just to say, and this is one of the challenges of DisTerrMem as well, is that we're coming from a lot of different backgrounds here, yeah? So I'm a literary and visual arts scholar to start off with, yeah? We all come from different backgrounds. So this is interesting in terms of methodologies, because I don't think that there's not a one size fits all. And it was one of the joys of working on Unrest for that as well, learning about different methodologies, applying different methodologies. So I think that's a discussion that we'll have over the next we'll continue having over the next few days. But yeah, what I want to say is that the background of the Unrest researchers, like the background of the DisTerrMem researchers, mean that we're going to be using lots of different methodologies, from social anthropology to visual analysis, to museum studies, to memory studies, to work by archival work by historians, just to name a few. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I? Yes, I wanted to add to that conversation between Doreen and Hartune about the possible misunderstanding what we might understand by humanizing the perpetrator. But I think it's super important for all of us, and also, you know, that we think more deeply about that. And sorry, I just want to start from a short example of my previous research, and then, you know, try to bring one possible solution. So I mean, it was a long time ago. I was a PhD student there, and then we decided with a colleague of ours, Zuzanna Bogumil, to do a research project on the way how the cities which were destroyed during the Second World War present the way, you know, they have been destroyed, and how they present the enemy, the destructor of the city. And we pick up Dresden, Warsaw, and Petersburg as case studies, you know, for the city. Or Petersburg, you know, wasn't bombed, but it was, you know, heavily damaged because of the siege and the famine. And we also knew that we shouldn't do it like two of us, like a Polish researchers. So we invited on the team, and it was quite courageous now when I think, because we were really PhD students with almost no funding at the time. We invited 2 Germans and 2 Russian colleagues to the team. We managed to get finally the grant of FVZ Foundation, the German one. And in that team, we visited, you know, all these 3 city museums, all the museums which were representing the catastrophe, and we debated that together. And I think all that was pretty much whatever between being antagonistic and agonistic, also between us, because we simply saw different things on the exhibition. So some of us were just learning history, you know, that first thing from this exhibition, but then we were just seeing things differently. And one probably of the most difficult debates which we had was in the Warsaw Rising Museum, which I would recommend for the people on the team who haven't seen it, as a key example of what we can call antagonistic exhibition, because it presents the Poles as the victims and the noble victims of the Warsaw Rising, and the Germans and the Russians as the pure evil, which is, you know, in between. But what I would say, it dehumanized them. In dehumanized fashions, German, to the extent that you can't really understand the war, right? What happened and why it happened. And that was, you know, kind of the discussion between us as a team, also our Russian colleagues who felt really offended in the museums, and when you go to the museums, you'll understand why. The Germans were just asking where are the Jews in the story, which was also interesting, you know, because the people are seeing different things, right, in the exhibitions, because they come from different sensitivities and different historical cultures. It was about Jewish ghetto? No, it's about the Warsaw 44 uprising. That's why it's. But anyway, we did have a, you know, very intense and unresolved until today, because we know each other, debate and discussion with one of the curators who couldn't understand why do we want to know about Germans? Why should you want to know more about Germans? So that's one thing. And then, one, of the answers we try to give her at the time, and the one which I still have, but I'm not sure if it's good. It's the one by Hannah Arendt, and her book about Eichmann in Jerusalem. Hannah Arendt was not, the one who wanted to say at the time, and writing a book about Eichmann to say that he was a nice guy. No, she just wanted to show what, it's the subtitle of that book, which is a banality of evil, that everyone took place and everyone was implicated in the killings at that time. Even in a most horrible way, those who were choiceless as the Jewish community. So she points, to like so many layers of that, but given the figure of Eichmann, as an ordinary perpetrator, makes him human at the same time. And that's the way kind of explaining that. And now there is a new book by Michael Rothberg, An Implicated Subject. And I think it's also important in a way to our discussion, because it shows that, well, perhaps we are not, all responsible for this in the past, but we are somehow all share, that humanness, right, in us, which might turn us to perpetrators, victims, bystanders, whatever, share responsibilities, but we some all are in a way implicated. So, but it's not about saying that perpetrators are good, right? The humanizing perpetrator. No, it's just saying that we can all become violent. In just to show that this is the human thing, the violence. This is how I can understand that. But it of course doesn't say that everyone was guilty in the same way. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
So our time, I'm afraid, ran out. But as you can see, we will move this discussion to our second panel. For sure, but now we have a break for lunch. We're inviting Bell, and we are starting at 1:30. Thank you very much to both online and on site for fascinating discussion, which we for sure will last for next years of our project.
People who participate in the next panel, if you would like to give a PowerPoint presentations, you need to download it from this computer or to stick a flash drive or whatever, do whatever to just place this in the computer.